a vlog talking about all things organized from the small business ReOrg. And we're talking about all things organized with our family, friends, and colleagues. As we begin this new season, which I mentioned in the little recap that you probably have seen, we're talking about home organization this season at ReOrgChats. What does that mean? What are the processes? Some tips on how to improve, uh, and a lot of amazing organization and the effects of the mind, body, and soul. And what does that mean? And how does home affect, again, the mind, the body, and the soul? And we're talking with some amazing ladies, all moms, which doesn't mean that that matters or not, but I think there's a sense of relatability, a layered of relatability. So we're talking today with Dr. Anna Rodriguez from the Self-Care Practice, and we're talking to Michelle Weber from Michelle Weber Lifestyle, and Dr. Shanna Van Ness from Dr. V, who will also be starting a new podcast coming out this coming month in January. So congratulations to you, Dr. Van Ness, and it's called Dr. Shanna, Dr. V Strategic Solutions. Correct me if I'm wrong, Shanna.
Yes, so it is called Dr. Shanna V Strategic Solutions.
Dr. Shanna V Strategic Solutions. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So yes, so we are chatting about what does that mean, right? How does home organization affect us? It affects us in so many ways. And we think of it only sometimes in a singular, like, oh, it affects us when our home is messy, of course. But it gets deeper into that. And that's really the gist of the conversation today. How does this affect us in a strategic way, which Shanna will elaborate? How does this affect us in the soul and on the mind, which Michelle Weber will get into that. And Dr. Anna Rodriguez, she will really get into the mind. How does that affect us in relation to stress? And how do we balance that? That's the secret, right? That's the goal. How do we balance life, our home? Sorry, we're having some little technicalities here, guys. How do we balance all that out? So I will start with you, Anna, only because I think it's a good segue into Michelle. And there's so many areas that all of you ladies can definitely, answer the question. And how does that affect us? I'm just lowering here Ryan a little bit, because Ryan is the background noise, is the intro music. This is moms. This is reality, guys. So yeah, and if you want to start real quick, I'll just ask that everyone, just including specifically myself, just mute yourself. So as you're speaking, I don't.
Oh, you just muted yourself, so I can. And speaking, you know how we were in our a moment ago, we were saying that as we're starting, that's when the children come.
Yes.
So my little addition is right here. So say a quick hi.
You can say hi. It's fine.
You can say hi. Noelle and Michelle.
The world of YouTube loves kids, right? Whether we like it or not, right?
Yeah.
They like it. I mean, mine is on YouTube.
So I cannot say hi, Olivia. So I will not be able to mute.
No, that's fine.
But we're keeping it real. So thank you so much, Noelle. I think, and I'll try to stay as focused as possible with this little distraction. But as I think this is a home organization, I think it's a relevant topic always, but especially now during the pandemic. And I may need to just mute for a moment because I can barely hear myself. Hold on. Oh, and hold on.
Don't worry, the kids are making cameo pieces. I'm expecting Chase any minute.
Right. So, Noelle, I
think it will be because of your practice, and we can get into definitely that. It can open both nicely into answer for Anna and Michelle and Shanna to answer the question.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you want to rephrase it? Do you want to say it again?
Sure, absolutely. So how does home organization affect the mind, the body, and the soul? And in your area particularly, since I know you do so much inner work and body work with your clients in a diverse of areas, all within health and wellness sphere, how have you seen, and based on your expertise, how does that affect us from the mind and the body? Yeah.
It really is such a holistic trifecta. I really think that in my practice, I look at it from that place, right? We look at it, how does it affect our body? How do we feel that chaos and stress in our bodies, right? And then in the next lens for me, emotionally, how is that emotionally affecting you? And do you notice that the home organization is affecting you or not? Sometimes it's just the stress of actually getting it done, right? Getting the kitchen clean before the next 5 things you have to do. And now with this pandemic, let's talk about cleaning the kitchen morning, afternoon, evening. We're not out for lunch anymore and the kids aren't at school necessarily. So that is like tenfold, I think I find, and with my clients too. And, I think people lost a lot of support in this time period. So there is an emotional, a physical aspect of that, right? The physical act of having to clean, the emotional stress and act of doing it, which you might have gained some pleasure from before, right? A lot of people enjoy cleaning their houses and getting it to a place that it feels serene, but it's really hard when you're home 24 hours a day. And I definitely have clients and myself challenged with that one. And then I think we look at it energetically, right? And a lot of people are not necessarily as aware, and some are, but the energy in the room around you, whether the room is organized, whether everything has a home, right? Because your home is your body, but your physical home also is where everything comes from, right? That is our expression, our outward expression of ourselves. And then we look at that, and if I go a little bit deeper into the energy of that, it starts affecting all of your chakras, it starts affecting all of the subtle bodies, and we can start to feel really wonky. And again, not necessarily know why. If you're not really honed in on the energy body, that's not always something people think about as a way to kind of come in and find some balance and find some ease in the chaos, right? To get grounded again. But it's very much so a lens that I go through often for people that are a little bit caught up in their stories, right? The limiting beliefs around some of the other areas. It's a nice way to be able to come in and say, okay, let's reorganize your energy body right now. We're going to shift it. We're going to balance it. We're going to clarify where you're at. And now all the other things, once that's done, seem a little bit easier. Everything gets a little easier, right? And then we can go in and look at, for me, I look at that once you're centered and say, okay, well, physically, you have this chronic pain in your shoulder. Let's physically go in there and shift that chronic pain, because is that chronic pain actually just physical? Is it emotional? Is it energetic, right? And so then going in and hitting it from the point of view of what's the most efficient, right? Because as moms, we need to be efficient. I need to be efficient too. So everything I do, within breathing, within energy work, or within emotional coaching, comes from that place of being able to merge it and be as efficient and clear and organized within ourselves holistically. So
I think on some really good points, piggybacking on the holistic element. I know from my personal experience that people are like, well, you're an organizer, and they expect sometimes when you're in the industry that you have your perfectly labels. And I always say that there's different types of organizers, and you have to do a methodology when it comes to your home and your organization that works for you, and works for your sanity, and brings you centered, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And I find that for me, just having not necessarily things in perfect place, but in an orderly place, that's functional for you. When I do, and when I send people that I've worked with out on the field to do a home organization project, I always ask the client, don't tell me how pretty you want things, tell me how functional you want things. Because, not to say that it's not, you can't have them aesthetically beautiful and functional, but sometimes it doesn't work on a day to day. And then that leads up to stress and, oh my God, if the labels, and if things are just too like like it's everything's not situated in a perfect area, and if in a perfect way, it causes the stress, this anxiety. I remember I had a very good family friend, who, this woman, you would literally tell her, let's go to brunch. Her house was impeccable. I mean, she would color code her sheets and her towels. And you would tell her, let's go out for brunch. Sure. Oh, I'm color coding the sheets. I can't go out now. And I'm dead serious. This is how intense it was. No, like serious. And she passed away. And I remember my one of my aunts, who's completely opposite of her, was like, "Oh, we're going to brunch." She'd stop. She'd leave the sheets in the basket, in the hamper, and leave. And not to say that one extreme versus the other is not good, but it's that balance. It's that, and you can see how much she suffered from anxiety, from like depression and anxiety, huge anxieties. I mean, hospitalized several times. She was a woman who kept herself very fit, looked always amazing, but always had this like anxiety, even when you were speaking with her. And to your point, Michelle, I mean, it's insane how that affects us, right? How sometimes there's so many layers that could affect us on our body and our chakras, to your point. But how like the home, how we try to learn how to balance that out, and what does that, and how much that affects our body, um and our mind. And with that, I'll segue into you, Anna, from a psychological standpoint, as far as stress, since we're I segued it into that topic. How have you seen, and what are areas in your practice that you have clients to handle stress, in regards to home or just in general? Because it all starts at home, right? Especially like you said, Michelle, we are working more from home nowadays. Um,
Right. I think so much of what Michelle said resonated with me, or the work, or a lot, or overlaps with a lot of what I do. I think more focused on, right, thinking about different levels of stress. So we all need some level of stress, in terms of like that there can be positive, like if we're, if you're renovating a home, if you're moving, if you're getting married, if, that there, or you're getting a new job. So that level of stress can be helpful in the sense that it pushes you to like grow as a person, and like to grow resilience. Then there could be tolerable stress, where it's a little bit more, but you have enough support in place, which makes me think of what Michelle said, of like that we've lost a lot of that support in the last year because of the pandemic and the way that we've had to reorganize our lives. But it could be tolerable, and we can overcome it. And then it could be when it's present over time and taxing our nervous system, it becomes toxic. So I think, there's like different levels of it. And when we think of toxic stress, we can think more of trauma. And so when I think about the home, and I think about how our home and the organization is an outer manifestation of what's happening inside of us, right? And in our minds. And I was sharing with Noelle that even in the past week, as we've been preparing for the episode, thinking about that, I've had time off from work because of the holidays. I've been more on top of tidying up, and how the clarity that offers my mind. So thinking about that, when I think about clients, we work a lot on becoming grounded. So like the level of stress that can impair their ability to be in relationship with others. So I feel also my work, I do a lot of work also with practitioners. So one of the things that, even in going into a setting of training, or let's say consultation calls, like that transition of, we find time in the beginning just for grounding, for doing some meditation or some breathing exercise, because one of the things that's happening with doing so much at home is that we don't have those natural breaks that we had before. So I think of even the transitions of like, I used to be at work and then I could commute home or even when I did work at home, kids are at school, and having that time to transition. And so now that's not built in. And so being very intentional. So I think about like the physical space, but also our mental space. So how do we think about what do I need? The one other thing that you spoke about, Noah, that stood out for me was that this is all individual, right? So that we all have different needs, and we all have different responses to space. So what may feel calming to me may stress you out and vice versa. And so I think another piece that not only does disorganization and clutter that can impact us individually in our minds, but it can impact our relationships. So that if I have a way of being that is not in alignment with my partner or the other people that share my home, that can cause strain in the relationship. Or if the way that I have my home impacts that I'm not going out, like Noelle, you were sharing with this friend, or that it inhibits me from having people over. So that's another another piece. So the relationships, the mind, the accumulation of stress in our bodies. And I think that's speaks a lot to what you were saying, Michelle, of that it's not just being stressed like once in a blue moon, but this ongoing stress, and that, the cortisol levels in our brains, that has an ongoing impact, like not just in our minds, but then in our bodies. So I'll leave it at that.
I think you totally nailed it on all points. And Shanna, I'm intrigued to see on the strategic points, because I know you also do coaching and private clients, just like we all do. But I know we talked a little bit about how the clients sometimes come to you with spatial, obviously, right? When they're starting their business and they come to you in an element of psychological. And you've said, that's not an area that I cover, but obviously you pinpoint on so many areas of how that affects us. If you want to just elaborate a little bit on, from a strategic standpoint, how does that affect? How have you seen with your clients and even your own personal space, right? Yeah. Okay. So piggybacking on Anna was mentioned on what she talked a lot about the psychological effects, obviously, of home organization, and how does that mean as far as bringing it spatially? How does that her clients and how it is personal, and how does and how what methodologies people use or should use in order to better improve their home,
Yes.
to make it more effective.
So I think
so I pose the question to you again. How does home organization affect, or have you seen affect, or what element it brings in on a strategic?
Absolutely.
From your clients.
I think just in your question,
consulting and coaching and training, those businesses are now being run from their home versus from an outside.
Yes.
A lot of the time.
Yes. So I think, Noelle, one, thank you for having me on the episode. And I'm so honored to be here with you as well as our other guests. And I believe for me, Michelle and Dr. Anna really hit on some pivotal points as it relates to the work that I do with my clients, being a business executive and life coach. And just in speaking with Dr. Anna, previously, one thing that I also shared is coaching is very different than the therapeutic spaces, right? And that is where, just even in my profession, that is firmly understood. So, Noelle, when you mentioned your example of the aunt folding in colors and wouldn't go out, right? That would no longer be a coaching client for me. That is someone that I would then refer out, because there are other things that are going on just in her being that then impact her ways within the home and then outside the home. So when you talk about the topic, just like home organization, right? Michelle and Dr. Anna hit on some very pivotal points of as it relates to decluttering the home, right? How do we clear up our space to actually get our mind just in focus, in alignment, to then even be productive in the space? And as a business consultant, that is something that I have found working with my clients with this huge shift of now leaving that office space and coming to then work at home, right? Oftentimes, a lot of executives and business people, they leave the home to go into that clean space that someone else needs to take care of on a day-to-day. They go into work spaces, everything is vacuumed and dusted and clean. But then when they come home, it is completely different in that they're in that space that now they look at and say, oh my God, I have to clean it up. I have to tidy it up. I have to put laundry away. I have to, as Michelle said, do the dishes, and even 3 times a day, right? And really coaching my clients into finding that space within the home that is just your space where you can breathe and feel free and have that flexibility to just be in your space, right? While maybe those other things exist within the space, but now that we have had to shift right into this new home workspace. How do we set up that maybe that tiny little space, but to make it our own? One thing that Dr. Anna said that was really profound, and I even experienced this just in my home spaces, is it's not always decluttering the things, right? The things, the paper, the dishes. It's really finding that space to be your individual self and having conversations with even the people in your space to set boundaries and declutter them away. Right? So like this is real, right? And again, in working with my clients, this is a real conversation, right? It's not to say, oh, well, you love your significant other, you love your children, of course. You may even be sharing space with aunt, whomever, grandma, mother-in-law, but it's okay to set those boundaries, right, in your space to declutter even the individuals, so that again, you can breathe mind, body, and soul within your space to do the things that bring you peace, right? That give you the opportunity to just self-preserve, whether it's those work minutes or hours, or even just to go and just preserve you. So when I think about the topic in the conversation, you know, everything is really intertwined. It's not just about the space and the things in the space that you can free up, right? And let go of and declutter, but it's also coming to terms with just the human to human connection in the space and setting those boundaries and being okay with those boundaries, right? And taking some of that me time in your own space. Michelle, you were on point when you said the energy, right? For me, the energy is not just about the things, right? It's also about the people that exist in the space. And now more than ever, as we are experiencing the resiliency of using Zoom and working at home, and we're all sharing the spaces, whether it's work, school, right, with our children. You know, one way to also set those boundaries and declutter to have that alignment of mind, body, and soul, it's even organizing your time as your space. This is time for mommy and her work. This is time for the children in their school time. This is significant other time. And then you know what? This is mind, body, soul, family time. And then let's break away, because it's all about that balance.
Creating that balance, right? And that's the goal, right?
Yeah.
It's something that we talk about.
Sorry if I went on and on, but these are just
no.
This is connect,
this is real.
Right?
This is
in the
exactly what I meant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and no, and you literally cleaned it up beautifully, which is why we love you, Shanna. Because and I think it's perfect, because you can't talk about the element of the home as far as just from an organizational standpoint without mentioning all the topics that you guys have touched upon, because so much of it, our home is now, it's our work, it's our personal space, it's our intimate space with our partner, which we'll get into that in a second and spice it up in here, guys. Because I always get excited with this one area of her practice that Michelle does, and she's like, I know what she's going to talk about. And you guys all know that I've mentioned it. I'm like, this is what Michelle does, and everyone's like, okay. She does so much more. But I find this fascinating because I've heard snippets of it, and I think it's important, right? Especially when we talk about the intimacy, and the intimacy not just with our spouses, but the intimacy within for ourselves. And so with that, I want to segue into that area. I know for me, having an area, especially with me, that some of you or most of you may know, we've had a moment where our kids wanted to come in with us, right, into our space, my husband and I, and we were like, sure, this is great, we'll do camping. And now we're like, get the hell out. And we've had to literally like shift our own minds of how we're intimate, obviously, and not just intimate in a sexual way, but even just connecting. Because we've implemented those logistical changes in our own home. Because we wanted to bond more and the kids, and it's all great, but right, it's creating those boundaries. And so with that, it's like, how do we? And Michelle, I'll start with you and segue to you on this because um, I know you do a lot of work in that area without obviously mentioning too many details with clients, but just from a practitioner standpoint, how have you seen that effect in that area of your work that you do with clients, the home?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's huge, right? I mean, our kids are around all the time and they're in your bedroom. But it's true, they're around all the time. And I think that physically, there are aspects of that like Shanna just said, we have to have the boundaries, right? We have to have the times, we have to have the structure, we have to have the boundaries. But then also physically, we have to actually be in a space to want that and to feel inspired. And I think Anna could probably speak a little more to this as far as marriage right now and the challenges that we all are possibly going through with that. I know I was really happy. Not that I didn't enjoy time with my husband for 2 months straight, but it was really kind of nice when he went back to work. Just even just that little bit of space where it was just my son and I at home. So I think that also, we need to breathe. And I think part of what you're getting at with my business is we need to breathe, right? We need to be able to have the space to breathe. We technically need to breathe, which is a big part of what you're talking about with intimacy, because part of what I teach is a very structured physical system of breathing. It's total reprogramming of the breath, of posture, and of the pelvic organs and the inner core. And so from a physiological point of view, that all seems very structural, but it's actually not. So what I'm seeing in my clients is that most of them have stopped breathing, and that within that, the stress levels and cortisol and all the other issues, the lack of sleep that's coming with all of this, nobody's breathing right now. Or I shouldn't say nobody is, but the conscious kind, not the just survival kind, right? And being able to like get grounded, I think that's a big part of it. Getting grounded in your breath actually helps you physically get grounded. Like Anna was talking about, she always starts with a grounding and a meditation, which I always do too. And we need that. We need to be able to get back in our bodies and intimately understand our bodies. I think that's not to get off topic too much, but that's the basis of it, right? Of like, how clear are we within ourselves? Like I always tell my clients, I want you to be the expert of your body. I am not the expert of your body. I'm just guiding you there. I am guiding you deeper. I'm guiding you into your own inner knowing so that if, intimately, is there a physical issue? Intimately, is there an emotional issue? Intimately, is there an energetic issue? Which, it's huge as that too, because I think that this time and this pandemic has been interesting. I see a lot of my clients, and Anna could probably speak again clearer on this, the traumas of their past are up. And I'm seeing, I'm doing a lot of work with them on limiting beliefs and energetically what they've gone through in the past that is a tuning fork that's causing stress right now and maybe creeping into their physical bodies and their marriage, Yeah, I have some clients that from the pelvic floor point of view, let me talk about that. From a feminine pelvic floor, pelvic rehabilitation place, I had some clients that were doing great. And it was amazing how much more dynamic motion they had physically in their bodies. Having sex with their husbands was all of a sudden pleasurable and joyful, whereas before it had been painful. And literally, I've seen them kind of revert back. And it's all related to that stress. It's all related to old habits or old traumas coming back, right? And having to come back and say, no, let's unwind that again. Let's unwind that and maintain it. And it's really been interesting because the ones that I have seen that though, they are healing faster this time around because their inner awareness and their own intimacy with themselves is so much clearer. And I think that is ultimately we have to get back to. We have to start at home, right? And for me, that's the physical part of the organization. Like you need to be able to organize your breath so that your body can ground, so that your energy can move, and you can have that overflow space for everybody else, not just moms. Everybody needs that, but especially moms.
And I think it's funny because as you were talking, I kept on thinking of the phrase, home is where the heart is, right?
Oh.
But it's the heart where it's where it all stems from, right? Not just on during the pandemic, pre and post, right? As we're heading to a post-pandemic per se. But it is but now there's so many layers of where it starts, right? Where it is. It's not just home is where the heart is, home is where the work is, home is where the intimacy is, home is where the children go to school now. It's all these areas and all these, it has so many placeholders now. And I think you guys raised on some very good points. And I think if you want to elaborate a little bit more from just from a psychological standpoint on the traumas, on what have you seen, just from a mental element.
Right. So I want to respond to that and also piggyback on what Dr. Shanna and Michelle have alluded to in terms of seeing ourselves as a foundation, just needing like a really sturdy foundation because everything stems from that. And that it's so important to be in touch with ourselves and in alignment and have that clarity of like, what is it? What do I need? What do I want? And that how that's different for every person and how to support that. In terms of trauma, there, I've also seen like a variety of things, but one of the for those that maybe trauma happened in the past, there are things that are happening now because of the pandemic, the isolation, like those types of behaviors that maybe they had when the trauma had initially happened is very triggering. So maybe it's something that they were able to kind of put on the shelf. Maybe they didn't deal with it, or maybe even if they did, like it's coming back because what's like the conditions of the pandemic and just the social distancing, is really reminiscent of what's happened. And so that gets triggered in the body. There's also more stress. There are more limits to different ways of coping. One of the, we're social beings. So one big part of healing or feeling better is connections with others. And so that's something that's really been impacted by this. And even though we have Zoom and we have FaceTime and all of that, it's not the same of like, I want to hug someone, or even that like I want that physical comfort. So I think it's even more challenging for clients or individuals living by themselves who may have even more limited contact than say us who are with our partners and children. So that's one big way. Another way that it can come up is that a lot of I work with individuals and families impacted by interpersonal trauma. So trauma that happens in the family. So for some, they are home perhaps with the person that is hurting them. And so I think even the ability to get help is something that's happening, like, in terms of like safety. So that gets us into a whole other part of organization. I think it's almost, it makes me think of like the luxury that we have, or the privilege that we can even talk about the boundaries that we have that other individuals may not have, that because if we, then we have to get into safety
Right.
and how, so that gets us into another topic, which is also important, because I think ultimately if we're trying to be grounded and connected to ourselves, where, to create safety, and even with like setting routines with our children, like I loved what you were saying, Dr. Shanna, in terms of organizing our schedules and our rituals. And, and I think this discussion, and I think a lot of just even the breath work or meditation and yoga, it's a lot of developing a practice, right? So it's not about perfection. It's not, because it's one of those things that you don't just do it one day, it's ongoing. So having that stamina and this idea of like that we can come back to it. And that it's okay if we didn't do it this day, but that we can always go back and just try to get that balance. That's, that we're all trying to find.
Perfect. And I think that I remember when I was talking about this with like my husband and everything, he was like, no, yeah, it totally affects. And I was just sharing with some colleagues. They're like, yeah, but I'm like, no, 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 no. It does affect you, and it has affected us. So the question then that I will ask each of you again, just from a tip standpoint, since we always like to share tips with, close with a tip. Um, to our audience members is, and I'll start with you, Anna, only because we've just finished it with you as we wrap up. It's what quick tip do you have or that you use to organize your home or center yourself, whether it's your obviously from a psychological standpoint or just on a not psychological standpoint. It doesn't have to be. What's your morning routine? What's your routine to be able to keep your home organized? Like, what is it that you do?
Okay, I'm like, I'm going to answer it. And what do I do to stay grounded? Which I think will link to like my, I think one, being in touch with how I'm feeling, kind of having a daily check-in, like, how am I doing? How am I feeling? What do I need? So that's part of it. Something that I'm trying to cultivate. So this practice of finding time in the morning where I can do like some breath work myself, making sure that I'm breathing. I have my diffuser with essential oil, so that, like, trying to target the five senses, doing some movement. So for me, I like yoga. And then sometimes a certain calming music that I put. So that kind of putting me in a very like Zen type of place where I can go. So that's like a quick one. And the other one's just been like trying to keep up with tidying up
Right.
in the morning, like with the dishes. And so things don't pile up. It doesn't feel so overwhelming. So like I said, that'll be it for now.
Yeah. And for you, Shanna? Shanna, I think we lost her. She's a little present. Shanna? All right, we'll go. Can you hear me? What is your tip of how you do to keep either way your home, yourself organized within your home?
So
on
I
a
think
daily or on a weekly, or just what's a quick tip that you use or tips of how you do that? How do you maintain? Our connection's a little frozen.
So yeah, so for me, it's similar to Dr. Anna. It's really that check-in, right? So one, waking up in the morning, doing breathing and stretching, but also as I'm starting my day, be checking in, right? When just my own inner core and alignment is feeling something, really acknowledging what I'm feeling in the moment. And through that process of acknowledgement, because that's a process in itself where people really have to take a step back, pause, and really be in touch with themselves to say, hey, well, what am I feeling right now? Let me pause for a moment. And even in understanding that I need to pause, just sitting down, because the dishes are going to be there. They will get done, right? They will get done, not being lazy, but I need that moment to check in. So throughout the day, making sure just that I'm checking in with my emotions, what I'm feeling, how I'm feeling, and just hitting the reset button. And that's one thing that I always encourage my clients to do. We can hit the reset button every day, but we get to hit that reset button every moment we feel something that may not be in alignment with our energy at that time. So it's okay to hit the reset button. So that's one thing that I encourage my clients and family and friends to do. And that's a tip that I would encourage all of your viewers and listeners to do. Like, it's okay to hit the reset button. And you can do that throughout the day. Have a checkpoint and a pulse point.
I think that's perfect. And I love that you talked about that. It doesn't just have to be a one-time thing. It could be something that it's
throughout
okay
the day.
Throughout the day. And
Yeah.
I'm sure, Michelle, you elaborate a little bit more, especially since you do so much body work, on what's your checkpoint or several checkpoints.
And
I think for me, it's very similar. Both ladies
and children, hit the reset button. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same. I have a similar morning. And then I think with, what that's being said for all of us starting that way, it's like, for me, I call it the inner witness. It's like getting my inner witness really present and grounded, and then being able to be in and of that space with my eyes open, with the world around me. And that's the thing I think that allows me to kind of do that checkpoint too, that Dr. Shanna is talking about, that I also check in. And also it's transitions for me. Like I'm very aware of my transitions in the day, and being able to say, turn off my computer with my last client, do another little check-in before I walk through the door to make sure my son's okay at school, right? And being able to have that moment and ritual within it. So I think I give myself a lot of freedom, but within kind of a structure that allows that inner awareness to always stay present, or hopefully so. And then I think the other thing for me that I want to touch upon that might, be resonant with your aunt is I also call myself a recovering perfectionist. So I grew up as a professional dancer, and so there's a lot of discipline that comes with that. And discipline is great. And I think that the consistency that Anna's talking about is also really important. I'm 100% an 80-20 kind of gal, 80% of the time be really on your game, 20%, it's like with food, with everything, right? Like it's just sometimes you got to leave the dishes and you got to go have fun or go meditate or whatever, So I think within that, being able to soften is also a part of my day, and looking around at my dirty dishes that maybe didn't get done because I only gave myself 15 minutes to eat lunch and, and all of my son needed help with homework. So, looking around and being okay with that too sometimes. The disorganization, right? Because everything has a polar opposite. So I think also it's like noticing the disorganization and maybe the chaos, and then being able to notice the benefits of organization and how that sort of flows through at the same time.
I think you nailed it perfectly, Michelle. It's something that I always usually say, it's an organized chaos. Or better yet, because chaos, sometimes people are like, well, no, chaos is not a good thing, right? It brings up so many things. So it's an organized disorganization. Right?
Well, and I think Anna said it too before, stress is not always bad. There are good stressors,
right. I think about, right, what does the mess mean to you, or the clutter, right? And that at time, and I think for me, balance sometimes is that those things are not get done because I'm focusing on something else. So it's just, it's more like this ebb and flow. And trusting the process, right? That everything will work out.
Yes. And
I use that a lot in my work. So I think of that too.
Yes. And I think the clutter and the chaos, sometimes is wanted and needed, because without the chaos, without the experience of the chaos, right, you can't get to that next point, or that next pivotal moment, or that learning experience, or that aha moment. So the chaos sometimes is what is wanted and needed in that moment to get you to that next point in place.
And I think that you nailed it on the head, because when I've seen clients in home organization, the first thing they always are doing is constantly apologizing. They literally, I'm like, don't apologize. You bought me to not say. And even when I started my practice, but right, to your point, Michelle, I love how you said that, and piggybacking on what Shanna had said earlier, that before you go into your next part of your home, right? The next layer of what your home, the purpose of your home is now, when you go in to check with your son and how he's doing, you self-check on yourself. It's almost like you do and I think that's a very good point. It's important to do wait, before I go fulfill this other role that my home is being used for, let me do a quick self-check. Or let me, even if it's not a self-check, let me just make sure that I've crossed all my T's and that I've allocated my time for this particular purpose before I go on to allocate my time for a different purpose. And I always have clients, again, like I said, they always, as soon as I walk in the door, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize. Like, you hired me to, I guess, hold your secret that you're disorganized. But don't apologize to me.
Right.
I'm just here to provide a service to help you not have to apologize for it. And I think for me, that was something that I always say, it's organization is personal. And what may work for you may not work for me, or for you, Anna, or for Michelle. And that's why I say we organize. When I work with clients, it's not to organize based on how the Container Store or how television says you should organize. Those are just models, but you have to create a system that works for you. I know for me, I'm personal victim that I don't always do a self check-in. I wake up and I have to get out. I have to go for a run. I have to go for a walk. I do it in the morning. I remember when home and I go back to sleep. Why? People are like, well, doesn't that contradict the whole point of going out for a walk to start your day? I'm like, no, because I need lots of sleep. And when I'm able to get it, I try to. And that's what I do. I wake up early and I go for a run or I go for a walk, and then I come back. And if I have time, I take my rest, and then I go and I make my tea or my coffee. And then I start my day.
But that works for you. Like that's your interconnection.
Yes.
With you, right? No judgment. We all have, our own methodology to propel us into whatever organization looks like. And if that's what gets you going, then that's personal and individual to you. Yeah.
Right. And for me, once I'm up and I'm going, if I don't have that time to come back and reset and like close my eyes real quick for another half hour before everybody wakes up and it's time to get people to school. I'm fortunate that my kids go to in-person school. So I know that I cannot complain at all. Balance, right?
And those strategies, right? It's creating now, right? So your husband is there as that support, right? And it's creating those strategies also to find the balance. Sometimes we have to implement strategies to find the balance.
Right.
And and that's what that sounds like.
It has to be an organization that works for you, your family, your business these days.
Yes.
For the different purposes that our home is being used now. And for many of us, that's been the case for a long time, right? Since I know, Michelle, your practice, you have remote clients even before this pandemic. I know, Shanna, you as well. And with Anna. For me, it hasn't been as much because obviously I could remote session and help someone with their home organization, which we do, but there is an element that I physically have to be there, right? Especially since in my case, ReOrg offers full service, right? We don't just go in and make it pretty. We drop off your stuff to donation. We help you with, reselling things. So there's this whole consignment reselling element to it. But within that, right, you adapt and we learn. And this has been absolutely great, ladies. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
On home organization and what does that mean? And I think this is a good segue into opening up the season about home organization. Stay safe, stay strong, and stay organized. Thanks for tuning in to ReOrgChats. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.